Hey, hi everybody, welcome. We're talking about grace. Bible is just so full of pictures of it, words about it, stories about it, illustrations about it. And yet at the same time, as much as it's so beautifully illustrated and portrayed in scripture, it's so difficult sometimes to define it. In fact, every time I think we try and define what grace is, we can tend to get ourselves into a little bit of trouble. Kind of like the frog in the science lab when you were at school. You can dissect it, you can analyze it, you can cut it at different angles, you can look at it from every different perspective. But as much as you do that, at the end of the day, the frog dies. And it's kind of like that, I think, in a sense, with grace. The more you try and analyze it, the more you try and understand it, the more you try and just take it apart, it's just so difficult. And we run the risk of it dying in the process. I think the best thing about grace is that you see its evidence by the people that are around you. I see the proof of grace all day. I meet people who have been restored in their minds because of grace. I see relationships that sit before me in a church on a Sunday morning that have been restored by grace. I know grace exists because I can see the proof of it. I don't need to understand it. I don't need to be able to analyze it from every different angle. I see the proof of it. I know that it exists because I see the proof thereof. When we look at people around us and we see how people's sanity has been restored because of grace, how people's relationships have been restored because of grace, I realize that we are the greatest evidence of the fact that grace exists. Can people see grace existing in your life? Or are you still the same cantankerous old goat that you've always been? Are you still as grumpy and as miserable and negative and pessimistic as you always have been? Because if that's the case, I'm going to tell you, it's not a God of grace being seen in you. You see, grace has certain effects. It brings graciousness. And in its wake flows kindness and goodness and mercy and forgiveness and all of those beautiful things. We know that grace exists because we can see the evidence thereof. And I'm sad to say that there are a lot of Christians, and I kind of put myself in this boat as well very often. We don't always act that graciously. And that's sad, because as much as God has given grace to us, I guess the outworking of having received is that it'll be seen in our lives. So when we look at this thing called grace, let's be reluctant to try and analyze it. Let's be reluctant to try and take it to pieces, to be able to try like the dead old frog to understand how it works. Don't do that. Just revel in the glory of it. And you people are the glory of grace. When grace is seen in our lives, that's worth 1,000 sermons. When grace is seen, evidenced in the proof of how it's lived out in your life, that's all it needs, is just the proof thereof. And when grace is seen by the change in your life, I'm going to tell you, the world will sit up and take notice completely, simply because they say, we don't need to talk about grace, we see it. We don't need to understand it. We know it lives and it exists because we see the proof of it in the lives of those who proclaim it. So have a look at your life today, or yesterday maybe, and say, how much grace was seen in your life? And it's not because you haven't tried hard, you may well have. But when we receive grace from God, people, there should be an automatic outworking of the wonder of that grace in us through our lives. If you try and force grace, and I'm just going to be a gracious person today, by 9 o'clock in the morning, you'll have all stood up. You're not going to make it. But when grace genuinely is received with gratitude in your life to God for what He has done for you, it just has to have an outflow of an inward reception of grace. I hope you have that. So let's glory in it, the wonder of it, as we express it naturally through our lives. Look for it in the people around you. Tell them that looks great on them. Grace looks great on you. Tell people that today, and let's see what happens. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.